2025 was the best year for Pokemon ROM hacks. I know I've said that in almost every one of my videos, yet approaching the end of the year, I now feel that way more than ever. Although I know that saying it doesn't automatically make it true, especially when we've had years like 2020 that brought in hacks like Radical Red and even Unbound. Thus, to make my case, not only does every hack in this video bring something fun or unique to the table, but they can also be played from start to finish. That's right, they are all completed. So, without further ado, these are what I believe to be the top 10 Pokemon ROM hacks of 2025. Starting off strong is Spirits of the Storm. Unlike every other hack on this list, you won't be playing as a brand new trainer, ready to take on your region's gym challenge. Instead, you'll play as the Detective Looker, living a somewhat peaceful life 3 months after Kyogre's awakening in Sootopolis City. But after catching wind of Team Aqua's existence in the coastal city of Portobello, you find yourself wrapped up in a mystery that involves more than just some washed up evildoers. What I really liked about this hack is how much it forces you to interact with its world. There isn't a yellow line or straight path telling you where to go next. You'll need to assist various people with their smaller issues, indirectly caused by the main conflict, in order to obtain more Pokemon. Sure, a lot of these side quests can be skipped, but you'll often find yourself facing challenges that would otherwise not be possible without those additional Pokemon. Outside of the story, it's clear the creator also cared a lot about visual quality, with both an enhanced Generation 3 overworld style and upgraded UI. Despite its narrative focus though, this hack also includes a very unique gameplay feature. During battle, you'll be able to look into the future, seeing what move your opponent will use next, and whether or not they'll outspeed you. At first, I'm sure you're thinking this sounds way too overpowered and removes any sort of challenge from the game. Trust me though, your opponents will have way stronger Pokemon than you will, especially on the hardest difficulty. But best of all, not only did the battles in this hack operate at a higher base speed, your team will also be healed to full after each victory. Spirits of the Storm was easily one of the most unique Pokemon ROM hacks I played this year, and I highly suggest giving it a try if you don't mind its short gameplay length. At number 9 is a very impressive ROM hack called Heart Gold Generations. The NDS ROM hacking scene has made some insane advancements this year, and this project is arguably the height of them, adding not only Pokemon from Generations 5 through 9, but even Mega Evolution. It should be said though that not everyone is here, but 950 out of 1025 is still a lot, and you likely won't even notice the 75 that are missing. Now, originally, this hack was released with pretty much just that. Barely any trainers were modified, as this was meant to be a base for the community to build future projects off of. And while that's definitely appreciated, saving many new ROM hackers tons of time, the creator would actually return only a month and a half later to add more content. This update included changes to every existing trainer, providing them with later generation Pokemon. Perhaps to your surprise though, these battles weren't super challenging. As a matter of fact, Heart Gold Generations is not a difficulty hack, meaning important bosses and regular NPC trainers are only slightly more challenging to beat than they are in the base game. Despite the lack of difficulty though, the hack isn't lacking in any anti-grind measures. The start of the game will give you both an infinite rare candy alongside a portable PC, and many Pokemon have had their evolution levels lowered, making them easier to obtain earlier. There currently isn't an EXP all, but that was something the creator is interested in adding in the future. Heart Gold Generations is a great ROM hack and an even greater sneak peek at what the NDS scene will offer in the future. So I highly suggest giving it a download if you want to play through the Johto remakes with almost every Pokemon available. We're not done with Johto yet though, with number 8 being Crystal Advance Redux. I feel like this hack has spent an undeserving amount of time flying under the radar, because despite the number of features and content it's been provided with over the last year, the project has remained barely discussed. But after playing through multiple of its versions released in 2025, I can't say that's for any real negative reason. Your adventure begins with the choice between 9 playable characters, the ability to enable level caps or a Nuzlocke mode from the PC, City, and then an EXP all that can be obtained right before reaching Violet City. Where things really get interesting though is the Pokemon balancing. I'm sure you're used to just about every existing region ROM hack buffing weaker Pokemon, but this one really goes above and beyond. Just about every single Pokemon has had their learn set massively tweaked, giving them each over a dozen new level up moves that still fit their original identity. And just like the last hack, the difficulty level is not at all unbearable. Yes, it's definitely harder than the base games, and you will need to plan accordingly, but the rebalancing I just mentioned will certainly alleviate the need to use Pokemon you might not like just to get through a single boss fight. With 550 Pokemon to collect, a plethora of anti-grind measures, a season system, and even following Pokemon, Crystal Advance Redux is easily one of the best ways to experience the Johto region. It absolutely deserves a spot on this list thanks to its massive updates throughout the year. At number 7 is a hack highly praised by many members of the community called Pokemon Dreamstone Mysteries. Taking place in the brand new region of Comoria, you'll play as a Pokemon trainer with the initial goal of tracking down the recently disappeared professor. On your journey across it, you'll of course defeat the region's 8 gym leaders, while also trying to put a stop to Team Somber. I'll be brutally honest by first saying that the story was probably the weakest part about the game. Other than the certain character's development, it didn't feel any more unique than the older mainline titles, and really only serves the purpose of giving you NPCs that tell you where to go next. What really matters though is the gameplay, which is definitely where this hack shines. Unlike most regions, Comoria has a very interesting gimmick to its route design, where most of it is treated like a gauntlet. What that means is once you begin your trek through a new area, you won't be able to return or access a Pokemon Center until you reach the next one. This made progressing through the region feel a lot more dangerous and exciting, forcing you to apply resource management skills where you would normally just walk back to the previous town for a free and easy full heal. Unless you choose to play on challenge mode, I can't say there's much more of a base difficulty increase compared to the older main series games. Outside of map design, Dreamstone Mysteries also comes packed with quality of life features to make the adventure a very smooth sailing experience. This includes the EXP all, HMs not needing to be taught to your Pokemon, and my personal favorite, the ability to increase the in-game battle speed, allowing you to enjoy the music and sound effects while no longer being burdened by the slow speed of the 3rd generation games. While there isn't anything that truly stands out about Dreamstone Mysteries, I do appreciate the application of recent advancements in the scene to an actually original region. Not to mention its supposed few-month development cycle is proof that creating a custom region ROM hack is much easier to do than it was many years ago. Now at number 6 is Royal Sapphire, a hack that I'm sure many of you are probably confused to see me ranking so highly. As just in the previous segment, I alluded that I'm not a big fan of enhancement hacks that take place in Kanto or Hoenn. However, this one manages to achieve 3 things that 99% of those hacks fail to do. The first one being its map updates. Royal Sapphire takes every route in the game and gives it a fresh coat of paint, changing both the map layouts and applying some updated tiles. But these changes don't destroy the original identities of each area, instead giving them more twists and turns, making them feel way more in tune with the tropical wilderness of the region. While they might not sound or even look that impressive to some of you, these modifications make the game feel way more exciting to continue playing, as you aren't just expecting to arrive in the same route or town you've probably seen dozens of times already. Secondly, the gameplay still feels very familiar to the original. I've never been a fan of the pre-physical special split battle system, but I will say that Royal Sapphire does as much as I feel it possibly could to make every Pokemon feel viable without including major changes to the battle system that weren't already present in the 3rd generation. And last but not least, the pacing. I've gotten used to these types of hacks throwing some ridiculous difficulty jump at me that can sometimes put me on the verge of losing all motivation to continue playing. But that's not something I encountered at all while playing Royal Sapphire, as I was able to finish 90% of the game in basically one sitting. For enhancement hack standards, I will say this one is pretty easy, though it wasn't a walk in the park either. The boss battles just didn't bombard me with obnoxious teams that sometimes required meticulous planning. They were fun challenges, with teams that could still be compared to those in the base games. Royal Sapphire has become my personal standard for enhancement hacks. It makes the effort to improve every aspect of the game, including the story, rather than just making the battles harder and giving Pokemon more moves to learn. So if you haven't already tried it, and aren't turned away by the lack of modern mechanics, I highly suggest giving it a playthrough. At number 5 is Pokemon Pisces. I can't lie, I personally didn't think this hack would end up this high on my list. Though, upon coming back to it after recent updates, I found myself enjoying it to a much greater extent than I expected. If you aren't already aware, Pisces takes place in a heavily modified version of Hoenn, with over 150 new Pokemon to collect. Arriving in Pacific Log Town as a returning trainer, you'll basically be venturing through the region backwards. Although, before we move into deeper discussion regarding this hack, let's get the pure positive points out of the way. First of all, the game looks fantastic. The overworld bears a mix of refreshing and familiar visuals to emphasize that this isn't the same Hoenn region you've explored dozens of times. On my initial playthrough, I did feel a bit mixed about the new Pokemon designs, but I think it was just their distinctive style compared to those of other fan projects, and they've really grown on me since. A compliment that I don't think this hack gets enough is how even the returning Pokemon have all received updated battle sprites so that they don't look out of place next to the Fakeamon. Finally, while I didn't find the plot to be very interesting, the designs of every new, returning, and even random NPC characters are all wonderfully crafted. Whoever worked on the visuals of this game did not miss a single beat. But as those of you active in the community are already aware, this hack received a lot of backlash on its original release, mainly for the difficulty and the lack of documentation. Months after my first playthrough, I realized that the game was never extremely difficult, so to say. Rather, just suffered from decisions that were probably overlooked during initial development, which, after returning months later, is something that barely feels like an issue anymore. It's still more difficult than your average Pokemon game. There are just way less cheesy or unfun moments that I felt plagued some of the hack's important fights. As for the lack of documentation, look, it's a free-to-play ROM hack that the developers spent years of their life on for free. If the lack of detailed information on how everything works bothers you, then I don't really know what else to say than just play something else or wait for it to be provided. Overall, Pisces is a very well-made hack that just isn't for everyone, myself included to a degree. If you're still wondering whether or not you should play it, I think the best thing to do is at least try it and see for yourself if it matches your taste. At number 4 is Pokemon Heart and Soul, a ROM hack that I strongly believe is the definitive Johto experience. If you're wondering what that means, I think the hack is able to appeal to the most number of players possible, and it does that by doing 3 things. First, and arguably the most important aspect, the customization. Upon loading up the game, you'll be given access to the most amount of options I think I've ever seen in a Pokemon ROM hack. Randomizer settings, Force Nuzlocke rules, customizable EXP gains, customizable EV gains, whether or not you want IVs in the game, whether or not you want to play with the physical special split, the list goes on. Obviously, I don't want to spend 5 minutes detailing every single option, but it's almost impossible for you to load up this game and not find a setting that appeals to you. Secondly, the difficulty hasn't been greatly increased, rather bosses now just have more interesting teams that actually use mostly Johto Pokemon. These fights might give you trouble if you're running a Nuzlocke, though without any extra rule sets, you'll do just fine playing normally with the team you enjoy using, especially thanks to the EXP All. The ability to battle gyms 5 through 7 in any order also feels like an interesting concept now, since all 3 of them use different teams depending on the order you choose to fight them in. Lastly, and probably not as important as the first 2, Heart and Soul has a nice amount of graphical enhancements that keep Johto feeling like itself with just more life scattered about its routes and towns. Best of all, Heart and Soul is a completely open source project, meaning if you want to create your own version of Johto without recreating the entire region or all of this hack's extra features from scratch, you can do exactly that. If you've made it this far into the video and are wondering why a certain hack is missing, well, don't worry, because a week after this video goes live, I'll be dropping a tier list of nearly every Pokemon ROM hack I played this year. So be sure to subscribe to not miss that or any of the amazing projects I'll be covering in 2026. Arriving at the top 3, these are all hacks that seriously blew me away this year, with both their level of quality and gameplay enjoyability. Taking 3rd place though is Pokemon Lazarus. By the same creator of Pokemon Emerald Sea Glass, if that wasn't obvious, this is an original region hack taking you on a journey across Ilios, a place that's geographically inspired by the real-world country of Greece. New region hacks have been making a big comeback this year, but Lazarus is one of the few that really feels quote-unquote new. From start to finish, you'll travel through different routes and towns that feel unique in both their layout and art style. To be in my top 3 of such an amazing year though, this hack obviously needs to excel at more than just world design. And I have to say, it does even more so with its gameplay. Lazarus starts with the choice between 9 different starters, access to the EXP All, and shortly after, the Dex Nav. All 3 of these make it easy to build fun, diverse, and even multiple teams. Not to mention, many Pokemon have had their typings or learn sets slightly tweaked to make them a bit more viable. With such crazy advantages in Pokemon variety given to you so early, it is worth mentioning that Lazarus is not very difficult. Even on the hardest setting, most battles can simply be beaten by bringing teams that cover the type matchups of your opponents. So if you're someone who craves a challenge, playing with Nuzlocke rules might be in your favor. Somehow, even after all that, I'm not done going over this hack's features. Similarly to Emerald Sea Glass, you'll have access to a cheat system, giving you free items, special gameplay modifiers, or even additional protagonist options. I don't want to take extra time listing them all off, but they're all of course detailed in the game's documentation. Just like Heart and Soul, Lazarus is a hack that I believe can appeal to just about any fan of the Pokemon video game series. Even though its story was a bit mediocre, I still believe that everything else the hack offers deserves the 3rd place spot in this video. Coming in at 2nd place, Super Mario Mon. Over the last 2 decades, there have been dozens of crossover hacks, with Mario probably being the biggest contender. Unlike all those projects that often just take characters from an IP and throw them into Fire Red or Emerald, Mario Mon's setting is a completely new region, heavily inspired by the franchise's universe. You'll start in the peaceful Mushroom Kingdom before traveling through different biomes, as you would in the official Mario games. These maps are almost entirely made up of completely custom graphics, and the different puzzles also inspired by the Mario IP make them really fun to progress through. Most importantly though, all the monsters and enemies from those games are what make up the hack's Pokedex. They were all balanced really well in my opinion, with a Pokemon variety that made it almost impossible to not build a fun team early on. Especially with the EXPO and portable PC, grinding is not something you'll ever really have to worry about. I was genuinely impressed with how much effort the creators put into minimizing backtracking and repetitive gameplay, all while preserving the game's identity as an RPG adventure. The last thing that surprised me about this hack would have to be its story. It's not mind-blowing or deeply written, but offers content that rewards longtime fans of the Mario series without confusing those who might have just played a handful of its games. With how high quality the gameplay, graphics, and even writing is, I'm seriously surprised with how hard this game fell off in popularity only a month or 2 after its original release. Unless you seriously despise the IP it's based on, it's just another hack that I think can appeal to almost any Pokemon ROM hack player. Before I move on to the number 1 spot, I wanted to quickly cover a couple of honorable mentions that, despite not being in my top 10, definitely still deserve to be in this video. The first one is Garbage Gold Deluxe. Now, I didn't particularly enjoy this game's gimmick of only offering the player bad Pokemon, but its collection of new story events taking place in a completely revamped Johto region were really fun to play through. If the trash lock gimmick doesn't bother you though, then you're definitely in for a treat, as the hack contains Pokemon from all 9 generations, quality of life like infinite rare candies, and even a custom battle AI. Next is Pokemon Record Keepers. This is a very unique roguelike, with its main gimmick allowing Pokemon to be swapped in and out of battle without using up any turns. This allows you to build interesting strategies that you normally wouldn't think of due to the lack of this freedom. But it doesn't end there, as upon defeating an enemy Pokemon, you'll be granted one of its moves that can be taught taught to any of your own, ignoring all learn set limitations. There are tons of bosses to fight and dozens of moves and abilities to collect, making it an extremely fun experience for anyone who enjoys these types of ROM hacks. And of course, I can't forget about Team Rocket Edition. Now, I did include this hack in my top 5 of 2024, although I wasn't able to find the time this year to give its most recent update a playthrough. Though with that update adding the entirety of the Johto region, it feels a bit wrong to not include it in my 2025 video. If you weren't aware, the hack takes you through the story of a Team Rocket grunt slowly working their way through the ranks and assisting Giovanni in conquering the Kanto region. It's a hack I highly recommend playing if you're a fan of good storytelling and don't mind the fire red and leaf green look of every map in the game. So, I'm sure just about anyone who normally watches my content totally didn't know what hack was going to be here, right? No, but seriously, I have a lot of good reasons why Odyssey deserves the #1 spot this year. Like a few others in this video, they really boil down to just 3 major things. From my experience, original region ROM hacks usually steer clear of Pokemon rebalancing. Even when they do dip their feet in that water, the changes are minimal enough where documentation of them often isn't even needed. Odyssey, on the other hand, goes all out. All 400 of the hack's Pokemon have had their learn sets completely restructured. Around a quarter of them have also received brand new regional forms. I've heard a few complaints about the lack of Gen 4 through 9 Pokemon, and I have to argue that including them would probably just break the balance of the game the developers have worked so hard to achieve. Though if you're on the other end of the spectrum worrying about being overwhelmed, a lot of systems like the EXPL make it really easy to keep more than just 6 Pokemon up to par. As many of you are already aware, Odyssey does not take place in any average region. The main story is progressed through a series of open zone areas, and the side content is explored through a collection of islands. Now, I have heard some criticism that Odyssey's stratums start to get a bit repetitive after a while, and I myself don't entirely disagree. Though, I do have to compliment how original it is for a Pokemon ROM hack. As you go deeper into the earth, the environment around you grows more and more dangerous. It's not just with its Pokemon and enemies, but the areas themselves also start to feel more difficult to navigate. Although I don't think anything negative can really be said about naval exploration. Traveling to different islands and collecting treasures while you take a break from the main adventure is a concept I haven't seen explored in any other ROM hack. Finally, the story. I'll admit, it's a good story, but it's not perfect, and just like any other story, anyone's opinions about the risks it takes aren't automatically invalid. However, I think a lot of people underestimate just how many risks Odyssey takes to deliver its narrative. My biggest pet peeve in ROM hack stories is not the quality of their writing, rather the fact that barely any of them attempt to write something original. Obviously, you can still do that with the gym challenge formula, as many PC fan games have proven, and of course I mean no hate to the developers who just want to focus on their hacks gameplay and only use the story to direct the player. I just think it's a bit confusing and maybe a little frustrating to see people praise the heck out of hacks for their simplistic storytelling, only to then slander the ones like Odyssey for putting in a lot of effort to deliver something much more original. The point is, Odyssey doesn't just provide a high quality experience, but also one that can't really be found in any other Pokemon ROM hack. And if I wasn't able to convince you here, then I do suggest checking out my full video on the hack for a much more in-depth review. Last year ended with me wishing for 2025 to deliver some fun and unique hacks. But sitting here now, I think saying my expectations were blown would be a bit of an understatement. Despite some of my heavy criticisms for a few projects, I'm still incredibly thankful for each and every ROM hack developer who provided us with these entirely free-to-play experiences. And for those of you looking forward to everything coming in 2026, make sure you subscribe to the channel to know exactly when those hacks release. Anyways, thank you to my channel members for their continuous support, and have a nice rest of your day.